Alright, sounds good. Alright, I'll talk to you later. See you, Ross. Well, apparently they got an orb.
To be a true sceptic, you have to look at issues of the paranormal with a truly open mind.
Oh, they picked up an orb, yeah. Simon was saying that he can't explain it.
Lots of the evidence that's often put forward in support of paranormal claims is not actually particularly convincing.
Ghosts and ghouls. Do they really exist? 3 years ago, a team of paranormal investigators embarked on a live ghost watch in the grounds of Bewley Palace House in Hampshire to discover the answer to this very question. Then, coverage of the ghostly vigil was broadcast on the internet, with the activities of the team tracked via web cameras. Today, the investigation is being restaged in the palace fortress of the Tower of London. First as a live television broadcast, and then as a streamed broadband event, harnessing the very latest in high-tech sensory and filming equipment. As this two-night vigil unfolds, will the team be any nearer to explaining the inexplicable?
Me and Andrew, we go back a few years, in fact, to a ghost watch that happened in Bewley in Hampshire.
It was a night and a half, that, wasn't it? I was listening to it, the tape you sent me
a
while ago, and things did happen that night. I often go back to it. We had a few things that happened ourselves.
Yeah.
But I remember smoke coming out of chimneys, and there was a vibe there that I've never experienced. I'd hope to experience it tonight, but I haven't as yet, but I suppose the night is young.
It was a very strange night, wasn't it? Because I went there, a kind of a sceptic, bloke off the street. When I left, I wasn't convinced about ghosts per se, but I was convinced that there's stuff going on that we don't understand.
I think kind of ghosts and spirits are sort of emotions without bodies. You know, we can't explain emotions, but we know they're there. And the same way as ghosts, you can sense things all the time. It's just that sometimes they carry a light, or apparently they carry heads under their arms. Not quite sure about that, but there's certainly vibes in every room and every place, and a place steeped in history. Like Bewley or the Tower of London, you're going to get weird stuff happening.
Our intrepid investigators attempt to lay bare the mysteries of the Tower of London. Anne Boleyn, Sir Walter Raleigh and Lady Jane Grey are just some of the famous historic figures who were executed here, and whose spirits are still thought to haunt its hallowed grounds. Research has shown that approximately 85% of ghostly phenomena can be attributed to natural causes. But what of the other 15%? To try and discover an answer, our investigators set up a series of controlled experiments at carefully selected locations within the tower. Monitored by audio and visual equipment, they hope to capture that which cannot be attributed to natural causes. In other words, paranormal activity.
I think people are always going to believe in ghosts because there's always going to be a reason for them to believe. If you think about somebody who's seen a ghost, then they've been provided with their own personal evidence that there is such thing as a ghost, and it's highly unlikely that they're going to accept any alternative explanation for it.
Spirits are people. Spirits that I contact are people, so they look like people, but sometimes they'll show themselves a little bit different to how they were, in the sense that they're allowed to assume any form.
I think it's difficult getting into detailed discussion about ghosts because, of course, they're not physical. And so, in fact, on the whole, we don't have the language.
An investigation into the unknown is full of intrigue and deception. Who or what our investigators seek are not necessarily perpetrators of a crime. Some are victims of jealousy, betrayal, and deceit. Lost souls searching perhaps for a final resting place. Or something more?
There are ghosts that seem to be aware of people's presence. Some people claim they've had conversations with ghosts. Obviously the observers are aware of the ghosts, and sometimes the ghosts actually seem to be aware of the observers.
I think there's two kinds of ghosts. I think there's what I would call a passive ghost and a smart ghost. The passive ghost is what happens in probably 99% of sightings, where the lady in grey is seen walking across a floor repeatedly, day after day or week after week in the same place. And to me that is probably explainable in physics.
Another type of interaction is poltergeist activity, which seems to take place when certain people are in the locality.
Well, the poltergeists, what I call divas, they're little angels. They're different types of divas, and they do different things. I mean, you have divas in the garden, you have divas all over the place, and you have divas that look after you. It just depends what area they're in. And they don't have brains, but they are capable of doing things and assisting you or driving you crazy. Poltergeists usually drive you crazy because they hide things and make life difficult.
There is a type of ghost known as a cyclic ghost, which seems to be entirely unaware of its observer. The ghosts will always do the same thing over and over again. It's almost as if they're trapped in time and space. The ghost is seen to come out of a certain door and, say, walk through a wall and disappear where there was a door previously which has since been blocked up.
Walls have carbon and electricity in them. They have the same constituents as a videotape. And I think it's quite possible that somebody who's been, let's say, imprisoned in the Tower of London for 5 or 6 years in this one room just walking backwards and forwards, their energy gets picked up in the walls. Or we have a lot of energy in us. If suddenly we're murdered, that energy has to go somewhere, and it could well be picked up in the walls, the floor of the room that person's in.
Auditory ghosts are where you hear strange sounds which can't be explained through natural causes. Sometimes in a ruined monastic building, you'll hear people have heard the sound of monastic chanting, Gregorian chant. Locked churches, you can hear the sound of an organ playing when you know there isn't anyone in the church. I personally have heard an organ playing in a church where the organ doesn't exist.
The Tower of London is allegedly one of the most haunted buildings in Britain. Many ghostly tales have emerged throughout its 900-year history. Here in the Bloody Tower, it is said that the scent of pipe tobacco lingers in the air. Will the tower give up its ghosts? Will our investigators find something more substantial than tobacco smoke?
I think the recent obsession with the paranormal is due to a number of reasons. I think if we look back over time, that probably everybody would agree that nowadays people are more uncertain and insecure due to things like there's a rise in crime, increased divorce rates, and maybe most importantly, the lack of power of traditional religious institutions. And I think all these come together to create a very uncertain world for people. So it's hardly really surprising that people might turn to the paranormal to find their answers, because the paranormal, like religion, offers people with some sort of framework and guidance and a way of structuring events and meanings.
I think that people are scared of seeing ghosts because they're not sure how it really happened. But I'm pretty sure you'll find that once a person has had a psychic or mediumistic experience, they won't be so scared of the next one.
This is a ghost watch like no other, brought to an international audience via the TV set and the internet. As the 2 nights of broadcasting unfold, a team of over 30 people will man the control room and web studio to bring uninterrupted coverage of what is possibly the first truly interactive cross-media event. That's over 420 hours of lost sleep.
Now, sleep paralysis is it's an interesting phenomenon, because it's one of those things that not many people actually know about, even though lots of people have experienced it. Essentially, sleep paralysis is when you're in that state between sleep and wakefulness, and occasionally in that state people realise that they actually can't move. And we think this is because what's happening is that the muscles of the body are paralysed as they are when you actually dream, to stop you acting out the actions of the dream. As if that wasn't scary enough, it was often associated with a very strong sense of an evil presence. And on top of that, you also often get very vivid visual hallucinations. So, you put all three together, you have a terrifying experience that people just cannot make sense of, and often will interpret in terms of having seen an apparition, having seen a ghost. In other cultures, they may well have their own particular interpretations. I mean, another very common one these days in our society is maybe of alien abduction, but it's the same core experience being interpreted in different ways.
Apparitions is a very complicated subject because there's so many different types of apparitions. There's the apparition that is seen by one person. There's maybe the hallucination, which are person thinks they're seeing. There's the apparition, the repetitive apparition, that's being seen by lots of people in the same place, very often not knowing that the apparition was supposed to be seen there. There's the apparitions, in case you don't know, more apparitions are seen of living people than of dead people, strangely enough.
Very often the apparition that is seen is actually not of someone who has died at all, it's of someone who is still alive. But having said that, there is still, it may still be, people would argue, that perhaps that is in some way the spirit of a living person that's somehow being projected. That's a kind of traditional interpretation. But another possibility is that, of course, what we're actually seeing is something that is essentially or entirely in the mind of the person who's doing the perceiving.
The skeptics' argument that most sightings of apparition is self-deception is very interesting, but the argument always put forward by the psychologists is that, and I'm sorry to put it this way, everybody else is stupid except the psychologist.
Spectral science plays a pivotal role. To record any possible paranormal activity, the investigators will use the latest digital video cameras and infrared technology. In addition, all atmospheric changes are measured: pressure, air currents, and most importantly, temperature.
A crisis apparition.
Crisis apparitions.
Crisis apparition is a ghost really that foretells the death of somebody, or sometimes people see them just before a disaster, like a bad air crash, rail accident, and that sort of thing.
That is when people are in very bad crisis situations, very often if they're dying, and they appear to people thousands of miles away.
It's claimed that the image of a person appears to the person who's having the experience, and subsequently that person finds out that the person they saw, the apparition they saw, was actually in danger at that time. There are a lot of these cases on record, and it's kind of hard to know quite what to make of them. The idea that in some way people are able to project themselves does fit in with notions of things like out-of-body experiences and astral projection and a whole range of other esoteric ideas. But again, unfortunately, those ideas themselves don't receive an awful lot of empirical support when you try to put them to proper scientific tests.
I do think that it does come from the residue of somebody who has perhaps lived here before, but it's also a very strong spiritual sense. It's part of the body going into a subtle area and never leaving this particular arena, and they just stay there. That energy stays there. I can't say that I think it's somebody, it's a creature that's sort of white and wafts around. To me it's more a type of energy.
But it's just possible that one of the people in the crowd could be a ghost. They look so realistic.
When I see a spirit, it's not the same way as you can see me. It's a lot more fluid, it's a lot more liquid, and it would be like looking through a glass and then suddenly getting a glimpse of yourself when it turns into a mirror. It's not really there, but it's there. You can see through it, but you can also tell what it does.
Sometimes ghosts appear as lifelike as you or me, until they disappear.
Are ghosts figments of a vivid imagination, or are they something more real? Is primal fear bred by the subconscious mind, or is there something or someone else to embrace? In the Tower of London, the Beauchamp Tower has borne witness to many a sad tale. It was here that the condemned awaited their final appointment with the executioner's axe. The walls tell their stories, enduringly recording their last desperate thoughts, hacked into the stones. A kind of immortality. Do the dead live on? Perhaps. Most of the evidence to support paranormal activity comes in the form of stories. Stories handed down from generation to generation.
There was one evening when I was sitting in Palace House in the library, and it came to be about 11:30 at night, and I thought, oh gosh, I haven't watered the plants on the public side, which is the old part of the house. So I thought, well, I'll just go through and do that. And I opened the doorway onto the public side upstairs, which is a chapel, and obviously nowadays is empty, except when the public are here during the day, but shuts at 6. And I knew that there was a service going on, and I could smell this incense coming out. And I just knew that I couldn't walk through because it wouldn't be polite to go and wander around watering plants when somebody else is having their service. So clearly the monks were there. But I wasn't frightened in any way. I mean, it was fine. And I just thought, well, I'll come back tomorrow and do this.
I mean, horror is really a reflection of the earliest roots of storytelling. I mean, the first stories human beings ever told were fathers sitting in the mouths of their caves at night, looking at the stars in the sky, trying to make sense of the universe, telling their family hair-raising stories of being chased by the saber-toothed tiger, of witches and demons.
I used to know the Pinney family, who live in Dorset in Betterscombe Manor, where there's a human skull preserved. And Michael Pinney used to tell me he used to get people to look round the building, because it was a Grade 1 listed building, and people go and look round the house and they'd say, oh, rubbish, I don't believe in the legend that if you take the skull out of the house, you'll die. So Michael's held up the cardboard box that the Betterscombe skull was in and said, all right, don't believe it, take it out. But nobody ever would.
I think man invented horror tales in the first instance to try to understand his environment. Ever since then, I think that the genre that we kind of call horror, chiller, supernatural, is a genre that many, many writers, I mean some of the greatest writers of all time, including Shakespeare, Dickens, have explored the humankind, that eternal question that we're still no nearer to solving today in 2001 than we were 50,000 years ago, of, what happened before we were born, what will happen after we die.
I think ghost stories are sort of words of warning, and they're often surprisingly told to children. I mean, they seem to have a great resonance with young minds, and it's almost like you're fencing out how far you will go with a ghost story, because it's a bit of a dare, it's a bit of a test as to how brave you're going to be, and so you're sort of driving fence posts into the sort of edge of your imagination, and you establish what the sort of things that you're prepared to confront, and that changes throughout your life. But those fears, the base fears, are the same for everyone, and they have been the same through centuries.
Fear is the key. Is supposed paranormal activity merely a personal manifestation of our fear of the unknown, the fear of death, the undiscovered country from whose bourne no traveller returns? Or do they?
Some people think that ghosts can only come from many centuries ago, but of course that's not true. And although at Beaulieu we have monk ghosts, we have 18th and 19th century ghosts, we also have one from the late 20th century. A member of our museum staff was sadly killed in a road accident. He was quite a young man. And not long afterwards, the museum manager was walking through the museum on his routine inspection, and in the corner of his eye he saw this member of staff polishing the lamps of the cars, and he just waved as he did, thinking, oh, that's Benji. And then he thought to himself afterwards, my goodness, he's not even alive, but he's still there polishing the lamps.
I believe that in the caves you still use the shaman or the medicine woman to channel down spirits of past ones, but we have actually got recording of mediumship in a very famous book we've got in the Bible, when Saul had to consult a witch. He did try to ask of God to sort of give him advice in dreams or through the prophets, and he wouldn't. And he went to a medium in Endor, and he didn't tell her who he was, but he wanted to consult the spirit of Samuel, and he didn't tell her who he was asking for either. But the medium opened up and raised the spirit of Samuel, and then she says, oh, why didn't you tell me you were Saul? So she knew who he was before he told her, if you choose to believe the Bible.
The fear of the unknown, fear of loss of a sense of home, fear of being in a strange place and away from family is, of course, that's the first big wrench, is to be away from your parents or your siblings. And then fear of people who would do you harm. But that's tied in with light. Of course, until 140 years ago, there were no publicly lit places. So when they finally lit the first public place in London, which was the Savoy Theatre, I think that was the start of the end of our fears, in a way. Because once the light got to the corners of the room, you had a lot less to be frightened about.
Possession, which was my kind of first really successful novel, I mean, the starting point for that book was, and it's changed kind of hugely, but the starting point was the son of some friends who was killed in a horrible car accident, and they went to a medium to try to make contact with their son to see if he was okay, and they did become very convinced that they were in touch with him, and they stayed in touch with him over a period of a number of years, and they got, I think, a great deal of comfort from it.
Got one. What you got, mate?
The particular kind of approach that we take in my unit here tends to be laboratory based, and the reason for that is that it's under the laboratory based conditions that you've actually got complete control over all the variables that may be of interest. So if you've got a particular idea about what may underlie some particular paranormal phenomenon, you can actually try to test it under controlled conditions. Now, to a certain extent, obviously, that introduces an element of artificiality.
The more and more that we move into the modern scientific 2001, the more we realise that we haven't actually changed very much in 50,000 years. Okay, we have all the, we have toys, and we have all this wonderful technology, but what's very interesting was in 1923 there was a survey done of scientists who believed in God, and it was 43%. And the same survey was done last year, and it was 43%.
Lots of the evidence that's often put forward in support of paranormal claims is not actually particularly convincing to the scientific eye. And so then the challenge to me and to other psychologists who feel that the evidence isn't convincing is to say, well, what is going on? There are a number of very well documented cases where on paper, if you accept the written account that's given, you would be very, very hard pressed to come up with a non-paranormal explanation.
We can see.
And we need to be back in half an hour.
Fine, no problem. Okay, so in that dog, Andy. Got one. What you got, mate? Let's have a look here. You've got...
Look at it, Ross. It's half in and half out.
It's not that window, is it?
No. It's right above the window, look.
Okay, so for the benefit of the camera, I'm now panning up that wall. I'm going to drop the frame rate back down again so that we get a better picture.
It's a beauty.
I'm going to go to 25. So what we're looking at here is this area. There's the window. There's nothing up there that would give us... There's a reflection there, look.
I'm going to try again and see if we get a similar response. Hang on. It just took me by surprise, though. I didn't expect. What's this? Doing the bloody pause. Come on. It's moved anyway, but I've taken another shot. Nothing.
So, gentlemen, what has been going on tonight? My goodness, some exciting things.
Where do we start?
Yes. How about with orbs?
Yeah.
Tell me.
It's been one of the most exciting starts to any investigation I think we've ever done, isn't it, Ross? I mean, usually we stake out a place for 4 to 5 nights. We've been here rather about an hour and a half, and already we have at least 25 pictures of these so-called orbs.
25 pictures?
At least 25 pictures.
What exactly is an orb, and why should we? Is this anything relating to an actual ghostly presence, or is it a ball of light or energy or sphere? What is it?
What we're actually seeing, or what we're actually picking up on a digital camera, is a sphere of bright light. Now, the mediums and the clairvoyants will obviously say that it's the soul of what's left of the human spirit once the body dies. And there seems to be... It is a theory, you know. There seems to be a lot of evidence that contributes to that, especially some of the tests and the experiments that we've done.
Sorry to interrupt you, but a lot of people will be standing out there in the public or watching this, and they'll be saying, well, couldn't it just be a reflection of light or a piece of dust or something to this?
We've actually done all these tests. I mean, one of the first things we do is to try and eliminate all the obvious things.
Right.
Is it dust? Is it pollen? Is it something in the air? Is it lens flare? Is it a digital camera phenomena? We've done all of these tests, and our still photographer is probably one of our greatest skeptics on the team.
So what makes you think this is actually a real entity?
We identify with these. They have a particular style to them. They're cellular in structure. They have an inner perimeter, an outer perimeter, an aura around them, and often a vapor trail behind them as if they're moving.
Now tell me, where exactly did you see these supposed orbs?
Well, I've got to butt in there before Andy says anything, because he suddenly said to me, Ross, I've got to go and take some pictures around the bloody tower. I said, why? He said, no, I've just got to take them. And off he went with the digital camera, and he come back with an amazing glowing orb. And this was at what time? About 9:15, wasn't it?
That's right about that.
Which was absolutely amazing, because Andy we nicknamed the orb catcher in the team, because he has this incredible ability to seem to know where to go to photograph them.
And you were only here for an hour and a half before this happened?
Yeah. It was on the Riley walkway, I think it was. It was. You pick up a certain feeling or whatever. I don't know what it is, but intuition, God knows, I don't know. And I fired off a shot, and hey presto, there it was. It was one of the brightest ones I've ever got. It was quite incredible. It took me aback.
Let me just read this to you from James. Did you spot the orb on your live broadcast? A few frames before the end of the interview between Paul Darrow and Jonathan Montague last night, I saw a spherical green orb on the screen. Why not take a look?
Because I've got it on tape, but I've got balls of light or something. What's going on there? We've got a big... Are they doing the focus or what?
No, sorry.
I just saw the legs appear.
It's very easy to imagine a ghostly manifestation. The first was just light bouncing off the grass. The second, A torch of the paranormal investigator caused a flare in the camera lens.
Is that the bottom centre of screen? We're just going...
Moving to bottom to top.
Oh, it's moved.
Yeah.
Hello, we're hearing some breaking news. Oh, wow. What is it? Okay, they're going to play me some tape. This is actually very exciting. We've got a floating orb that has apparently been caught in the Bloody Tower, Paul. Okay. The Bloody Tower. One of the most haunted locations in the tower. Here it comes. There you go. Did you see that? There was a ball just flitted across from one side of the screen to the other, moving down. That's quite exciting stuff.
What we've got there is significant for us because this particular camera, this is not just an ordinary camera. It actually shoots in infrared. So what you actually saw, the green tint in the film that you were seeing, is actually the whole scene was being illuminated by infrared. It's significant for us as the team because it's exactly the same event that we got at Bowden House. And it started off with one flying orb, then it went to 2, then it went to 5, then it went to 15. So for us, it's an indication that maybe things are high up for us.
The movements that we saw there looked to me, for all the world, like something being buffeted around on air currents that were there in the room. It was interesting that the candle actually flickered out and flickered back on again at one point, suggesting that there were drafts around there. Now, the description of those things that we saw as orbs tends to imply that they're actually giving out light. But if you look carefully at the film, and I've looked at it a few times now, it looks to me that whatever it is that we're looking at only is visible on the infrared camera when it is actually in some kind of a light source. It disappears when it goes away from a light source. Looks like the scene's being lit from kind of bottom left, and there's a natural light source over on the right there. Now I don't actually know what they were. Could have been anything from kind of specks of dust to some kind of seeds that got in there, but again, don't find it very convincing evidence that we're actually witnessing something paranormal.
And if you look, it comes clearly from the door. It starts in the doorway. Now the ironic thing is that we were actually setting up a test in that next doorway, so it's as if it was trying to escape from us. It was coming out of the door, so that gives some sort of, if you like, well, not proof, but certainly a form of evidence that there was a reason for it being there. It's come out of the door, it's coming across the corridor and then disappearing. Now, if we go with Dr. Chris French's argument on orbs, they're always within a light source. So there's something floating around that the light source has picked up. There wasn't a light source there other than the flash on the camera, and the flash would have been top left of the screen, so the orb would have come across the top left of the screen where the flash is. The flash wasn't over that side. There's no illumination in that lower area, especially from where it's coming there, other than the light in Riley's bedroom. As you can see, it's coming down and it appears to go straight through the wall on the left, or disappear into the darkness into the left. So it does give some credibility. Now, we've sat down there exploring all the usual things, the dust, etc., etc. Now, let's take dust as a possible theory. If that was dust, why is that the only one grain of dust we've seen all night? So I think we can straight away say it's not dust. If you think of other things in the air, like pollen, feathers, things that float about, again, there would be more than one, realistically, if we're honest. So what we've got there is, as you rightly say, something unexplainable, an unexplainable phenomena. And when I started this evening with the team, I was asked, what would we get tonight? Would we see Mary Queen of Scots? Would we see Sir Walter Raleigh? And I said, I think and I hope that we'll see some orbs at least. And I think that's now what we're starting to see. We've had some good photograph evidence, and now we're catching video as well.
The question of whether, again, I would have on my investigation sceptic psychologists, I'm always inviting them to come. And they're always saying, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I've got to do this and I've got to do that. Very, very rarely has what I call a serious skeptic admitted that he would like to go on a real case. They're always saying it. Oh yes, I'd love to go on a real case. Present them with what you believe to be a real case and ask them to come along. That's a different story altogether.
Have our intrepid investigators captured paranormal activity on tape? The evidence is frustratingly inconclusive. Much of it can be attributed to natural causes. The floating orb during the live interview with Jonathan Montague was merely light bouncing off the grass of Tower Green, whilst in Beauchamp Tower, the torch of a paranormal investigator caused a flare in the camera lens. As for the floating orb on Rowley's Walk, who knows? Believe in ghosts?
We've had this phone vote going, and the question was, do you believe in ghosts? And surprisingly enough, well, maybe it's not a surprise, 75% of those who phoned in actually do believe that there are ghosts and that ghosts do exist. So obviously there's still something worth investigating it.
You seem to be coming round to the view that there might be something out there.
Well, it's a possibility that there might very well be something out there, but we've got Ross here now, and I'd like to ask him this question, this person who sent an email about we shouldn't try and make people believe that orbs are really the souls of the departed. And Ross, you kind of feel that they might be, and this is a very tricky subject. I'd like to ask you about that.
This is an awkward area of research because at the end of the day, we have to get to the bottom of what it is, and that's part of our work. Now, at the moment, we don't know they are souls. We're assuming that that's a possibility, and that's one thing that we've yet not been able to disprove. We're not saying they definitely are. I certainly think that if they are, some of them are running away from us, some of them are trying to hide, some of them are not happy to be filmed. Again, that's speculation and no more. We have a very, very dodgy subject area when we're talking about the souls of dead people. And on that subject area, we have to tread very, very carefully as paranormal investigators because we're always going to upset someone.
I think when you take away the crutch of religion, you sort of suspend people you suddenly make them ask questions, well, what's it all for then? Particularly with people having this, quarter-life crises, having breakdowns at 25 because they're not achieving what they thought they would. It's a very appealing idea to think that you must live on in another form or must come back. It's a real fundamental thing, and that nobody wants to think we're in the leftover of the past. Antonio Bayet said that we're a nation suffering from the weight of its own history.
Ruth, you're a freelance writer. Did you come to all of this with an open mind? Do you still have an open mind about the paranormal and these ghosts?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. When I was doing the experiment in Beauchamp Tower with Ross, we started off, we didn't feel anything at all, but then I started to get this smell. It just came and went, and it was sort of a smell of burning wood, and I thought maybe it was floor polish, and I put my nose to the floor and had a little sniff, but it certainly wasn't floor polish. And then the smell kind of got stronger the nearer we went to that door, which led to the corridor where Ross got the orbs. But I don't know, I think it's one of those things where I think everybody has an ability, everybody's got that psychic gift or whatever you want to call it, and I think coming to places like this and doing the investigations, I go in with an open mind, but I'm also very aware of my senses, and I'll say to Ross, I'm smelling this or I'm seeing this, and whether it's right or whether it's wrong, we make a note of it, and if he says, yes, I smell it too, then, it could be something or, it could not.
I think there is, you can have suggestibility there as well, where you can have a smell and then because someone says, oh, that smells like tangerine, you give it that name and then suddenly it smells like the tangerine, so there could be suggestibility there. So one person talking about something can affect another person's opinions of that same thing. So it's to do with how you're already given a label about how to think about that particular experience.
4:47 a.m. What the hell's going on in the Beauchamp Tower? Total darkness apart from one light, which could be a camera, but what are the sounds of heavy footsteps moving furniture? Thomas Morcell by the box shape of a person, hazy in appearance, now next to that bloke. What are the sound and film crew up to? Another fright out of my life at 4:50-ish. These are all from the same time, 4:47, 4:50. 4:42.
Right.
So what happened? Did you look at the tape there? What happened?
Well, I think we've got to go back and review the tapes.
But there's 5 of them from the same 6 minutes.
It's interesting because they actually say that the bulk of paranormal activity happens between 2 and 6 in the morning because that's the average time of the day that most people die, funnily enough. Now, if that's true, and again, I say we have no proof behind that at the moment, it would link in with the time that we got the orbs together at Bowden House because that was 5:15 a.m.
Some of the audience appear to support our investigators' claims of paranormal activity, but further evidence is needed. So they return to Rawleigh's Walk, the location of the first alleged sighting. Will they capture another orb on tape?
I could just quickly run to an email here, because Ash passed me an email while we were down with Danny there, and it says, why did none of these so-called experts bother to take the time to check out whether the lighting phenomena that was shown on the show was just in fact dust? We've done quite a few dust tests. Now, Graham Matthews, who's my stills photographer on the team, has spent ages trying to replicate the orbs using dust, pollen, moisture. We've tried all this because obviously we're as puzzled, and the only way that we can be serious about any of these is to prove 90 to 95% or 85 to 90% of the time that there is a logical and reasonable explanation. So it's only when we've exhausted all of the possible explanations can we throw it to the viewers and say, hey, I actually believe now that this is something else.
You cannot apply logical explanations to something that you don't understand. We may be talking about all sorts of situations, all sorts of dimensions. We've only got 5 senses, and we live in a 3-dimensional situation. But we know there's other things out there, like time and space, which we don't know too much about. And there may be dozens, hundreds, thousands, millions of different things out there that we don't understand. That doesn't mean to say they don't exist.
The highlight for me, probably last night when I was sat up in the upper bell tower, which obviously by now we know is above. I've completely forgotten where it's above now, but it's above
Thomas More
Yeah,
Cell.
it is, isn't it? A very important place. That's the highlight for me last night, when I definitely, when I arrived in there, I felt something. I felt my body moving to a certain extent. And it sounds ridiculous.
Just slipped on the floor.
No, it wasn't even my stomach moving there. There was something there. I felt something in my body. I can't explain what. And it's almost as if the ghosts or ghouls want to say actually knew we were there and were saying, you know, this is our home. Please leave now. I felt something, and I've taken that away from the weekend. You know.
Have you been pleased with the results so far this weekend?
Response has been amazing. We can't even get a final tally of what we've had in, but I mean, from even the remarks that you've read out on air, we've just it's been a constant stream, and people, as soon as anything was actually appearing on any of the pictures that we'd taken or video that was taken around the tower, then reactions just came flooding in straight away.
The whole experience has been very, very good. To actually get into the Tower of London and do a ghost hunt for us is an actual brilliant privilege. To find that we've got moving orb footage which we've caught in other places and orbs on stills just confirms that what we're actually catching in every haunted house we seem to go to is the same thing.
Bewley, you did that 3 years ago,
yep.
And you did it with some of your friends, and you had Lucian and what have you, and it was in comparison to this much more disorganised in terms of the scientific approach.
Yeah.
Are you really good that this, or really pleased that this year you've moved it on?
Yeah, I mean, 3 years on, obviously the technology and the whole approach changed. I mean, the Tower of London, you know, is a unique place to actually do this, but it also has unique challenges. And I think that the ghost detectives have actually brought a very interesting perspective to it. I mean, obviously I didn't realise that life after death does merely extended to orbs. I'm not too sure that I'd want to be a floating orb to eternity, but I mean, we've certainly got something. Quite what it is, we hoped we'd actually come out with some kind of conclusive proof one way or another. We have orbs which, frustratingly, are inconclusive. But I'm sure that Ross and his team will, as I say, review the footage and maybe come back with some interesting conclusions of their own. Only time will tell.
Ghosts. Do they really exist? Were you convinced by the floating orbs of light? Remember, ghosts are not confined to the Tower of London. They're all around us, shadowing our every move. Or so they say.
I think really, as regards ghosts, you should look at things objectively. You shouldn't dismiss everything. A lot of scientists have an awful habit of, because something can't be explained through all known laws of physics, they say it doesn't happen.
The ghosts or spirits are on the other side. They do have more knowledge than us. I do happen to believe that it is a great white plane out there, but because the other side is not concrete, because it's mutable, they can show or they can create or they can imagine and therefore have anything they want over there.
If somebody said to me, can you prove that ghosts exist? I would say to them, can you prove they don't exist?